What a summer it's been. It's so hot outside. I don't even want to think about gardening outside. Many of our thoughts are turning to what can I plant inside? How do I start seeds inside? And what should I be doing right now so that I can finally garden once temperatures cool off? I recently asked on Instagram, what are your questions about fall gardening and seed starting? And I was blown away by the number of questions. In today's video, I'm going to show you my seed setup, address some of the most common questions, talk about when things go wrong, and then also show you what I've started indoors for fall planting. If you're looking for a step-by-step detailed way to start seeds indoors, check out my other video. My name is Angela from Growing in the Garden, and my garden is in Mesa, Arizona in Zone 9B. I love sharing inspiration and helpful tips so you can be successful in your garden. One of the questions I got the most was, how do I find room in my house for a seed starting station? The nice part about setting up a seed starting station is it doesn't need to be up all year. And the area really doesn't need to be that big. We're just talking about 2 feet by about 4 feet. Most grow lights are about that size. For many years, I set it up in my laundry room. Now that I've had a few kids leave the nest, I have an office and it's set up here in my office. Look around your house and see if there are any empty areas that have an outlet nearby, and go for it and see if you can set it up there, just knowing that it doesn't have to be up year round. The next most popular question was, can I use the light from a window or from indoor lights to start my seeds? And I wish I could say yes to this question. I wish I could say, yeah, just use what you have. That's gonna be fine. But unfortunately, the light is the one non-negotiable that you need when you're starting seeds indoors. You may have seen seedlings that are really leggy and stretched out. That's because they're looking for light. And really, those seedlings aren't good for much of anything. Any kind of long light that puts out a good amount of light that you can put above your seedlings is going to work, but it needs to be really bright in order to work. It doesn't need to be a fancy LED light. It can just be a shop light, a fluorescent light, something like that you can have above your seedlings. I love Arizona Worm Farm and they have an amazing seed starting mix, but I live really far from them and I can't always get over there when I want to start seeds. So there are a lot of commercially available mixes like this one that you can buy, and they work just fine. So what I do with this is I add in a good amount of worm castings to my seed starting mix. So it's about 2 parts seed starting mix to 1 part worm castings. And I mix that together, and that's what I use to start my seeds. Another common question was, how close does the light need to be to my seedlings? And generally, that question is going to be answered by the type of lights that you have. If you have a really bright light, the light may not need to be right next to those seedlings. However, another light may need to be a lot closer. Pay attention to your seedlings. And if they're emerging with the leaves close to the surface of the soil without stretching, then you know you've probably got it about right. And you want to aim to keep that light at least a few inches away from those seedlings as they grow. If you're seeing scorch marks or bleached out spots on your leaves, that is telling you that the light is too close. So you need to put that light a little bit further away. The kind of shelf that your lights are on really doesn't matter. It is nice if you can have a way to adjust the lights up and down, but it isn't completely necessary. You can also get really creative and stack those seed trays up on things and then take those away to get those seed trays further away or closer to the light. We're aiming for 70 to 80 degrees is the average best germination temperature for a lot of different seeds. So if your house is somewhere in that range, then you probably don't need anything like a warming mat or anything like that. There are certain seeds that are really particular about the temperature that they germinate at. So if your seeds aren't popping up and aren't germinating, that could be one of the issues to troubleshoot. So I got a lot of questions about mold and fungus gnats and things like that. The one thing I've found that really helps with the excess moisture, which is what is causing those issues with mold and with fungus gnats, is to sprinkle a thin layer of vermiculite after planting my seeds. Adding a thin layer of vermiculite is definitely going to help with some of those moisture problems. The other thing that can help is I have a bug zapper inside my seed starting room. And if I do get some fungus gnats going on, that has definitely helped keep the population numbers down. So your seed packet is going to give you a lot of information about whether your seed needs light or darkness to germinate. Pay attention to that because that will make a difference. A good rule of thumb is that the larger seeds are going to be planted deeper and the smaller seeds will be planted closer to the surface. So how do we get the seeds to germinate? We talked about temperature, we talked about lighting. The next trick is to use some sort of a humidity dome. You can use a thin layer of plastic wrap and put that over the tops of your seedlings to trap in that moisture because we don't want those seeds to dry out before they germinate. Once that humidity dome comes off and that plant actually begins growing, that is when you're gonna have to keep a closer eye on the moisture levels. I like to water my seedlings from the bottom, a watering can, and then I'm filling up that tray, and that allows that seed starting mix, that soil, to get absorbed from the bottom up to the top. But sometimes you've got these little teeny seedlings that you know those roots aren't going clear down and you don't want them to dry out under these lights. So that's when that vermiculite will help retain the moisture. But then I also will use a spray bottle to keep that vermiculite nice and moist. Because I put worm castings, which have a small amount of fertilizer, but a lot of good things for those seedlings, it isn't necessary to begin fertilizing those seedlings right away. But what do you do if your seedlings aren't growing? If you're really seeing that those seedlings just kind of sit there and not continue to grow. So that is when you may want to begin fertilizing your indoor grown seedlings. What I like to use is a half dose of a liquid seaweed fertilizer and put that in with the watering about once a week. If you've got some worm castings in your seed starting mix and you're fertilizing, you're going to have nice growth from those seedlings. So if you're still struggling with growth, you need to double check your light and make sure that that light is bright enough and close enough to your seedlings. So when you're starting seeds indoors, you are tied a little bit more to home, which can be a struggle. But if you do need to go away for a few days, typically if your pots and your containers are large enough, you should be able to go 2, 3, or 4 days between watering. So if you know you're going to go out of town, make sure that you're watering everything really well from the bottom and allowing it to completely soak up, and you should be fine for a few days. And because watering really is pretty simple and you're watering from the bottom, if you're gone for longer, that's easy to show people, about how much to water so you can have help watering and not let those seedlings die. Potting up means that it's not time to plant outside yet, and so you need to provide a larger container for whatever it is that's growing. So you're going to check a couple of things in your plants to see if it's time to pot it up or not. First, you're going to check the bottom and see if there are a lot of roots growing out of the bottom. So don't be afraid to take your plant out of the container to see if it's time to pot it up. And it looks pretty healthy. It's still pretty happy in this container, and so I'll probably leave it in here. If I saw roots circling around this container, if there was a mass of roots here at the bottom, then I would know that this plant has gotten too large for this container and it would be time to pot it up. It can be a challenge to keep plants growing happily when it's not quite time to start outside, and it can definitely be a juggling act to make enough room indoors for all of those plants. I definitely have to get creative and arrange my trays in a different way. They don't all get that full shelf. They've kind of got to share that shelf. How do you know when it's time to plant outside? Well, you can look at the planting dates for that particular crop, and that's going to give you some clues. But you also need to look at the weather and really decide, okay, we are unusually hot. Do I want to try and put these plants out? It really comes down to paying attention to your plants and paying attention to the outside conditions to see when they are ready for you to plant. And then you just do the best you can. So how do you know when it's time to start seeds indoors? These are the planting calendars that I use to determine which seeds I'm going to start indoors. I have one for vegetables, herbs, and fruit, and then another one for flowers. But if you don't have a list like that, you can generally count back 6 to 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the seed, back from when you're going to plant that outside. And that information is often going to be found on your seed packet. So when I'm thinking about what I'm going to start indoors, I take a look at this month and I think, okay, what crops do I want to grow, and then I began gathering my seeds. It's definitely not too late to start right now. There are so many things that you can still start indoors, and even going into September and October, there's still plenty of seeds to start indoors. Do you have to start seeds indoors to be a successful gardener? Absolutely not. But strengthening those indoor seed starting muscles is good for you. You will love the feeling of being able to grow a lot of your own transplants. And it really gives you a lot more flexibility and freedom to grow the types of plants that you want. Many of my favorite spring flowers are hard to find transplants for in nurseries. For the cost of a package of seeds, I can have lots and lots of those transplants. Seed starting is really a skill that you can develop, and then you will get better over time. So this is the seed starting setup that I have up in my office year round. I've got a few things going in here. You can see that humidity building up on the inside there. That's just what we want, keeping those seeds nice and moist inside there. So this is an additional shelf that I keep in my garage and that I will bring here into my office a couple of times a year when I outgrow that other seed starting station. So the nice thing about this is these lights can be a little bit further away for when these plants get nice and large, or they can actually be really close for some of these seedlings because they adjust. So now I'll show you which seedlings I've got growing inside.
As a kid, I used to live out by a lake, with lightning bugs collecting sticks and secret handshakes. I was invincible then, my heart so pure I had no fear. And those were the years that I hold so dear. And it felt so right having you by my
I hope this video has answered some of your questions and given you a few ideas about ways that you can be successful starting seeds indoors. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments. If you have tips you'd like to share, I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching.